Hi, I'm Ria. My grandfather flew 6 hours just to watch my brother walk down an aisle that wasn't worthy of the shoes on his feet. When he arrived, they parked him behind the trash cans like a stray. My mother sneered. That old beggar will embarrass us. And when I pushed back, because apparently dignity is a crime, she slapped me hard enough to ring the glasses and had me thrown out of my own brother's wedding. 20 minutes later, a private jet cut the sky like a signature, and what followed froze the world in crystal. Want to guess who owned that vineyard? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? And would you have spoken up? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. I showed up to Trent's wedding in a forest green dress I'd bought secondhand on a mean Boston afternoon. Cap sleeves, soft, simple, one of the last things in my closet that still felt like me. Napa's sun was a blade, carving long shadows across the stone path that led into the vineyard. Roses and grilled duck in the air. Champagne everywhere, bubbling like smugness. Someone was always topping someone else off. No one offered me a glass. A waiter ghosted past without a glance. Guests drifted in designer gowns and hand-stitched suits. Hair shellacked with brands I can't pronounce and wouldn't afford if I could. I caught my reflection in a glass door. Wind-tossed hair, no makeup, freckles loud. I looked like an RSVP that slipped through quality control. My mother, Vivian, spotted me and approached the way an appraiser approaches water damage. Lips pursed, eyes sweeping from scuffed heels to necklace-free collarbone. You look. She paused, searched for a compliment, found a receipt. Decent. No hug. No, you made it from Boston. Not even a nod to the fact I'd RSVP'd solo while everyone else came in pairs, in packs, in publicists. She peeled away to air-kiss someone with a tighter dress and a higher net worth. Trent didn't notice me at all or pretended not to, laughing near the olive trees with his college crew, one hand glued to a glass of amber, the other welded to his fiancée's waist. Sloane wore ivory lace that cost more than my grad school combined. When her eyes touched mine, they skimmed, polite and blank. We'd met twice. I was apparently forgettable in 2 languages. I drifted the perimeter like a fire alarm no one wanted to test. I hadn't come to detonate anything. For all their sins, they were still my family. And then the town car crept in. The rear door opened and out stepped grandfather Elias. Stooped, yes, but upright on pride. Dark blue suit probably last worn at grandmother Ilara's funeral. Crooked tie, speckled hands, and eyes that lit up when they found me. Ria, he rasped, thin voice, steel core. You're the only one worth flying for. Peppermint and aftershave. 82 and stubborn enough to cross a continent. No one else moved. No one else waved. A staffer cut in to help. Her smile stapled on. Her hand directing us past the flowers and past the pond and past any place a camera might find a heart. She tucked him into one plastic chair, wedged by 2 overflowing trash bins and the catering vent that hummed like a threat. My chest cinched. There had to be a mistake. She checked a chart and evaporated. 20 feet away, my mother adjusted her bracelet in sunlight like it was a broadcast. Why is Grandpa sitting there? I asked. She barely looked at me. He insisted on coming. I told him he wouldn't enjoy himself. Beggars can't be choosers. He's not a beggar, I said, words low, anchored. Vivian leaned in, voice like a chilled knife. That old man will embarrass us. The way he talks. The way he eats. The way he smells. I stared, really stared, at the face that raised me to doubt myself. Taut. Cold. Not even pretending. So I did the one dangerous thing I do well. I stood up. As people settled for the rehearsal dinner, I rose from the table where they'd planted me beside the valet's son. Yes, really. And stepped onto the little platform near the welcome arch. Excuse me, I said, tapping a fork to a glass. A hush rippled outward, neat as pins. Quick question. My voice shook once, then found spine. Why is my grandfather by the trash while strangers sit at the family table? Click heels. A storm named Vivian barreled up the aisle and slapped me. The sound cracked the air like a starter pistol. Gasps. Stares. Ungrateful, she hissed. You don't belong here. She snapped at staff. Escort her out. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I let the humiliation burn like antiseptic. I walked, heels snagging gravel, skirt licking dust. Trent looked away. My father, let's call him Marcus, adjusted his collar and studied the wine list like scripture. But Elias, my Elias, stood. He didn't speak. He only pressed something into my palm. A green silk handkerchief, frayed, monogram are in faded silver thread. I held on like it might hold me up. Outside, the olive tree's shade felt like a confession booth. I sat on a low stone wall, the handkerchief cold in my hand, and let the truth settle. This wasn't heartbreak. Heartbreak happened years ago. This was confirmation. Then came the sound, low thunder, not quite car, not quite storm. Wheels. Heavy. Sure. A black Rolls-Royce slid into the side path, paint catching the late-day gold. 2 SUVs followed like punctuation. I stayed seated, fingers welded to silk, refusing to hope. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door with ceremony, and there he was, Grandfather Elias again, but not hunched. Set. Tailored suit that fit like memory, sunglasses that weren't from a pharmacy rack, 2 men in dark suits flanking him like knowledge. He saw me, peeled off the glasses. Well, sweetheart. Steady voice, new weather. Ready to shake things up? What is happening? My pulse beat yes and no at once. He offered his arm. The gate staff froze. One reached for a radio, then thought better of it and opened the side gate. The same gate they'd hustled me through like garbage. Let's see if your brother remembers who actually owns this land, Elias said. Water meat face. This wasn't some overpriced venue. This was home. At least for him. I kept pace, the green silk warm now in my fist. The air flashed in sunlight like a blessing I didn't apply for. Inside, music drifted on the warm air. My mother's voice filled the patio mic, frosted with pride, praising Trent's vision. I tasted bile. Elias didn't break stride. His 2 men slid ahead. The doors parted and silence poured in, thick, gelatinous, the kind that makes everyone hear their own pulse. Trent's glass hovered mid-sip. Marcus turned funeral white. Vivian froze with the mic in her hand like a statue of bad choices. Elias walked straight through them, parted the crowd without touching a soul, and eased the microphone from Vivian's fingers. She let it go. She had no choice. I wasn't going to say anything. He began, calm, heavy. Didn't want to make a fuss. Weddings prefer illusions. Nervous chuckles skittered and died. But maybe it's time we remember what built this family. From where I stood by the olive planters, I saw my father's hand inch toward his pocket, instincts of a man who loves documents more than people. Trent studied his shoes. Sloane's parents traded whisper panic. The servers stopped pretending to move. I slipped inside quietly, leaned against a stone pillar like I lived there. For the first time all day I felt not small. I'm 82, Elias said. I built this vineyard with these hands. Named it for my late wife. Gave it to the family, trusting it would be used for something good. I swept the room. When I flew here today no one knew because no one invited me. My name wasn't on the list. At the gate my driver didn't recognize me. A ripple of shame, human and audible. They sat me by the trash. I know the difference between a seat and a message. He turned to my parents and smiled without warmth. Message received. The silence congealed. Then Elias spoke 7 words and you could hear a fork drop on carpet. I built this empire for her, not you. Breath left the room. Heads turned as if pulled by wires. I didn't step forward, the moment stepped to me. The green silk in my hand felt less like fabric and more like a key. Her, he repeated and pointed at me. Who is she? Sloane whispered to a bridesmaid. As if the answer weren't already pulling the ceiling down. The photographer lowered his camera like even glass couldn't focus. Elias didn't shout. He didn't need to. He walked down from the riser, reached into his blazer, and drew an envelope. Heavy cream seal, unbroken, time stamped in ink that looked like it had waited years to breathe. He crossed the space and held it out to me. This is yours, he said. It always was. My fingers shook when they touched it, but I didn't open it. Not yet. I could feel Marcus coiling a denial beside the bar. Could hear Vivian inhale a rehearsed speech through clenched teeth. Could see Trent calculating the angles like the room was a spreadsheet with blood pressure. The date on the envelope caught my eye. 2 months before Elias's pneumonia scare. Before the long weaponized silence. Before they made me the ghost of my own life. And I knew, with the cold clarity of mountain water, that the performance was over. Act 1 had ended. The truth had entered the building and locked the doors. Elias didn't blink. You told the lawyer I was mentally unfit, he said to Marcus, voice even, every word a nail. You forged a medical affidavit while I was sedated. You used my hospital stay as cover. A murmur crawled the room. The signature on the blown-up copy he held, wobblier than the steady cursive I'd seen on every birthday card, glared from the mic stand like a bruise. Elias brought the cane down on a table, sharp, clean, the kind of sound that makes guilt sit up straight. You stole it, he said, not shouting, somehow heavier for it. Not from me. From her. Heat rose to my face. Trent looked at his shoes like they had exit strategies. Vivian set her jaw. Rehearsed poise, cracking hairline by hairline. Trent found his voice first, palms out like a man trying to calm a riot he started. He changed that will. Whatever that is, he gestured at the envelope in my hands. It's not legal. A cousin cleared his throat from 2 tables back. Is that true, Marcus? The room tilted toward my father. No one breathed. I lifted the envelope just enough for the bold date to catch the light. 2 months before Elias's illness, stamped and notarized. He didn't change anything after, I said quietly. You did. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. Timing, Rhea. This is not the time or the place. Yes, I answered steady. It is. You threw me out. You hid Grandpa behind trash bins because you were afraid of being seen next to love you couldn't control. The silence that followed wasn't shock anymore. It was exposure. Elias turned to the officiant. Close the book, he said. There will be no vows today. This family needs a reckoning before anyone pretends to make promises on broken ground. The officiant's hands trembled as he shut the leather binder. Pages whispered into place like a verdict. Sloane's mascara slipped. Her parents made small, frantic circles with their eyes, calculating exits. Marcus stared at the floorboards like he might memorize their grain and disappear into them. Elias reached into his jacket again and produced a thin folder, creased, controlled. After my medical records were mysteriously sealed, I retained a private investigator. He spread photographs and documents across the riser's edge. Marcus entering a legal office after midnight twice. Copies of affidavits with a doctor's note from someone who hadn't examined Elias in a decade. A power of attorney form, witness signatures that all lived at the same address. It was temporary, Trent muttered, voice dry and small. Mom said. And yet, Elias cut in, eyes on him. You were the first to lock her out. He pointed his cane at me without looking away from my brother. You changed the security codes. You barred her from Harvest. You watched her name get scrubbed from labels and stood there. Trent flinched like the words hit bone. I didn't move. I could still feel Vivian's slap humming under my skin like a bad chord. I refused to touch it. I wouldn't give the sting a stage. Something in the crowd shifted, chairs, breath, belief. I heard a woman in navy whisper. I saw her with Mr. Harrow at the market last fall. He held her hand like a daughter. The room inhaled the way a room does right before it decides who it wants to be. Elias stepped down, walked through the parted sea of silk and nerves, and stopped in front of me. He held out another document, thicker, heavier, ribboned with an embossed seal. I never stopped believing you, he said, voice gone softer, not weaker. They won't erase you again. When the deed landed in my hands, the world narrowed to paper and ink and the weight of being seen. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. I just held it like a lifeline and watched everything I used to want from them collapse into dust. I didn't need to breathe anymore. The room emptied by degrees. Some people fleeing, some pretending they needed fresh air. Some staying because truth is a spectacle no one admits they paid to see. Later, in the study off the main hall, the noise muffled by old wood and older money, Elias sank into a leather chair, posture finally conceding to gravity. I sat opposite with the deed on my lap, edges curled, a faint coffee ring kissing one corner. The signature, his, was the opposite of the affidavit. Decisive, familiar. I checked it twice, he said, reading my face. It's real. That's not what I doubt, I answered. He exhaled long. I changed everything the day I watched your mother throw away your Stanford letter. He said it like a confession and an apology. She told the housekeeper it was junk. I knew better. The past slid its cold hand under my ribs. I remembered the hollow weeks that followed, the sudden silence from him after the pneumonia. Calls that stopped ringing because someone else had picked up on his behalf. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I thought quiet protection would hurt you less than war, he said. I was wrong. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, and the man who had parted a crowd with truth looked briefly, humanly tired. I arranged a trust. Your name. Your 30th birthday. But 6 months ago, Vivian forged a power of attorney. A friendly physician signed a note. The court didn't check. Paper beats people when no one is looking. We sat with that. The old clock ticked. Outside, the slope lights scattered like low stars. Somewhere a string quartet packed their bows in shame. He slid a small digital recorder across the table. If they tried to bury more than your name, record it. Later, long after the guests were gone and the staff had cleared the last glass and shame from the patio, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The deed was still within reach when I read the name. Matteo. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from him since Trent restructured the staff and Matteo vanished at night without a word. His voice was a hush sharpened by urgency. You need to come now, he said. They're about to dump everything. I didn't ask what everything meant. I grabbed my jacket, the keys, the recorder. Elias wanted to come. I told him no with a look he understood because he'd worn it first. The back entrance of the facility glowed a thin, guilty yellow under a side door. Matteo's hoodie was pulled low. His hands shook, not with fear exactly, but with the charge of someone who had chosen a side and knew it would cost him. They moved fast, he murmured, keycard slipping. Follow me. Quiet. We threaded corridors lined with crates and old barrels and responsibilities no one wanted. In a tiny office, a computer monitor blinked a screensaver. Too innocent not to be complicit. Matteo hesitated in front of a bulletin board. A laminated sheet pinned center. Emergency cleaning protocol approved by V. Moreau. Vivian's signature stared back like a dare. I thought it was formality, he said. I was wrong. He pushed into the fermentation room and the air hit like a slap of chemicals. Ammonia-edged metallic ghost. 3 stainless tanks foamed at the lips. One hissed like a bad lie. I covered my nose with my sleeve. What is that? Solvent, he whispered. Industrial grade. Not sanitizer. Someone poured it into the tanks. My throat tightened until swallowing felt like guilt. Which batch? He didn't meet my eyes. Syra. The last blend Alara helped finish. I stepped back until steel pressed cold into my shoulder. I could see her there. Purple-stained fingers humming over a barrel saying wine remembers if you don't lie to it. I took pictures, foam labels, the protocol with Vivian's autograph like a fingerprint at a crime scene. I filmed the hiss. I filmed the clock. Matteo handed me a small USB drive. I copied security footage before they wipe it. Trent came in after hours. Twice. He wasn't alone. My mouth went dry. Why are you giving this to me? He offered me 10 grand to call it an accident. He swallowed. I took it. The hurt flared. Then he finished, words tumbling out. I gave it to charity. And I brought you this instead. You're the only one who treated this place like something worth more than a photo op. Something in my chest pulled taut and then gave. Not forgiveness, alignment. I reached for the drive like it could steady the floor. He pressed a sealed bottle into my hand. From an untouched batch. You'll need testing. I drove. Past the county line, the road turned to dark ribbon and I pulled into a Walnut Grove turnout. Engine ticking out heat. Dawn leaking pale into the edges of night. I stood in the cold and asked the air the only question that mattered. If I tell this truth, I burn the family name. If I don't, I bury her twice. I saw Alara at a barrel, smudged hands, soft smile. Wine keeps who we are if we protect it, she'd said. I got back in the car and called a toxicologist I knew from a college lab in Santa Rosa. Rush analysis, I said as soon as she picked up. Industrial solvent. Possibly methyl ethyl ketone. She agreed to meet in 2 hours. Sunrise smeared gold over the hills as I parked by the estate offices. Black sedans lined the lot like ravens. Behind thick oak doors, the boardroom hummed with the low murmur of men who confuse volume with power. I didn't knock. I walked in mid-sentence. Trent selling a disaster to shareholders as unforeseen turbulence. Heads snapped. I set the sealed bottle in the center of the table. Then the USB. No preamble. No apology. I walked to the projector, plugged in the drive, and waited for the first frame to fill the wall. The wall filled with truth. Frame. The timestamp blinking past midnight. Trent slipping through the fermentation wing. Glancing over his shoulder, punching a code. Another figure behind him, cap low, hoodie up. A 5-gallon container, the nozzle uncapped. Trent tipping it toward the hatch. The metal throat of the tank widening like an open wound. Foam rising. Trent's mouth moving, no sound, only the shape of a curse, as he wipes a splash from his sleeve and shoves the hatch shut. No one spoke. You could hear the projectors fan like a nervous animal. A shareholder I barely knew, gray suit, glacier eyes, cleared his throat. If authenticated, that's felony product tampering. He turned to Vivian without ceremony. And your signature on an emergency cleaning protocol that suspends the usual checks? Problematic. Vivian's smile tried to resurrect itself and failed. We were safeguarding the brand. You were bleaching history, I said, voice steady as a flat line. Syra was Alara's last blend. The door eased open and Mateo stepped in, cap in hand, the choice already made on his face. She's telling the truth, he said. He paid me $10,000 to call it an accident. I took it, put it in a charity box and brought her the footage. Trent shoved back his chair so hard it bit the carpet. You'd take his word over your blood? That's the problem, I said, meeting his eyes. You don't know what the word means. Marcus finally found his voice. Rhea, think. You'll destroy us. I am thinking, I answered, about the woman who taught us that wine remembers if you don't lie to it. The oak doors opened once more and the room stood up before it knew why. Elias entered slowly, cane tapping out a verdict. Beside him, Mr. Landry, estate counsel, carried a sealed envelope like a sacrament. Elias did not sit. About a year ago, he said, nodding to Landry, I revised the family trust. Too much ego. Too little legacy. Landry unfolded the papers with a rustle that sounded like a storm coming in. Effective immediately. Rhea Moreau holds full power of attorney over all family operations. The land, winery, and associated assets are secured under a separate estate trust in her name. The transfer is executed and filed. Silence, then the smallest sound. Sloane's ring clinking against a water glass as her hand trembled. Trent stared at her like she was supposed to fix it with a glance. She didn't move. Vivian laughed once, sharp, lonely. You think a piece of paper makes her worthy? No, Elias said. Her worth made the paper necessary. The toxicologist's report arrived by courier before lunch, crisp and merciless. Industrial solvent markers, consistent with methyl ethyl ketone, present in the contaminated tank. Landry read it aloud. The board didn't vote. The board scattered. Compliance called the sheriff. Trent stormed out and discovered every exit led back to himself. Marcus stared at the table and for the first time in my life, had nothing to sell. Vivian's eyes went glassy and distant, like she'd stepped into a room where she could still be the hero if she just refused to hear the ending. We didn't handcuff anyone. We didn't scream. We documented. We signed. We watched the sheriff collect the bottle like a relic of a faith we refused to keep pretending in. And when the doors closed, when only our breathing remained, Elias placed his hand over mine where it lay on the deed. Truth doesn't fix you, he said. It frees you to fix what you choose. Days blurred. Lawyers wrote. Auditors counted. The press asked questions and got answers that didn't sparkle. We shut down production, cleaned the tanks until they shone like apologies, and invited no cameras to witness it. I slept 4 hours a night and dreamed of barcodes and vines. On the third evening, seeking something that didn't feel like paperwork, I walked to the lower garden, Alara's place, where the dirt still remembered her knees. The bench waited. The breeze smelled like admission. I knelt by the old vine where she kept her wooden crate and brushed at the soil until my fingers hit metal. A rusted tin box surfaced like a secret that had timed its arrival. Inside, a linen-wrapped envelope and a single dried grape leaf, stem delicate as a question mark. Alara's handwriting bloomed across the page, sure, musical. If you're reading this, you survived their noise. They never saw your strength. I did. Don't let them decide your worth. This land does not belong to the loudest. It belongs to the one who loves it back. I pressed the letter to my chest and heard her hum in the wind. Not magic. Memory. 3 weeks later, the vineyard looked different. Not prettier, truer. Paper lanterns hung from olive branches. Tables wore simple linen. Hands that had actually tended vines broke bread beside barrels. No photographers, no speeches someone's assistant wrote. The mayor showed up in boots older than Trent's last loyalty. People brought stories, not angles. I wore a navy dress and Alara's grapevine brooch pinned over my heart. Matteo moved through the crowd refilling glasses like he was stitching something torn. Elias arrived as the sun dipped. He waved off help with that steady small pride he carried like a coin. We stepped onto a little wooden riser near the pergola. He raised his glass. To the one who remembered what family means, he said, voice clean enough to drink. This vineyard isn't mine anymore. It belongs to Ria. Not because of blood, but because she chose to love what built us. A hush fell that felt like respect, not fear. That's when the past tried its last door. A black SUV rolled up, gravel spitting, and my parents climbed out as if the night owed them an entrance. Vivian's beige was buttoned to the throat. Marcus wore a face he must have practiced in polished chrome. Trent trailed behind, jacket stiff like regret. Ria, Vivian said, eyes sweeping the lanterns, the tables, the people who hadn't been bought. Nice little gathering. Don't get used to it. I didn't waste syllables. The crowd kept talking about soil and rainfall. No one shifted to make space for their performance. Counselor, Marcus called, spotting Landry. We'll be contesting. You can't, Landry said gently, almost kind. It's irrevocable. Vivian's mouth opened, closed, opened. You're tearing this family apart. I'm ending the part where we pretend the tearing didn't happen, I said, not unkindly. They didn't have an audience. They left in the same car that had carried them in. No slammed doors. Just the sound of gravel deciding to be gravel again. Later I took the mic. My hands were steady, my voice simple. I wasn't raised to believe I'd stand here, I said. So I built myself a place to stand. This wasn't handed to me. It was planted. It grew. We toasted, not to me, not to some brand, but to silence that protects, to love that survives scrutiny, to roots that held when institutions didn't. After the last chair folded and the last glass chimed back into its crate, Matteo and I sat on Alara's bench. He unrolled a weather-soft blueprint he'd found in the back of her desk. Hand-drawn lines for an expansion she'd dreamed about, annotated in red. Pergola here. Wild roses. Shade for workers. In the margin a note. Leave room for joy. She wanted this, Matteo said. With me, I answered. We mapped rows by lantern light. Pinot on the ridge where the wind is honest. Pergola where the wild roses would reclaim their giggle. A small square I circled and labeled Alara's grace. The stars took their time coming out. I let them. When he left, I walked alone between the rows. The vines threw long, kind shadows. At the main stem, a small brass plaque caught the moon. For Alara. For those who bloom after being buried. I touched the edge, then the soil. The night didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, like a room after someone you love has come home and set down their keys. I didn't win. I returned. I whispered to the vines, to the woman who taught me to listen, to the man who refused to let a room define his blood. Thank you for waiting. It always was mine, not out of vengeance, not because paper said so, but because I remembered it when they forgot. I didn't need their champagne or their approval. I needed truth, hands, time. And I had all three.